The morning began with a quiet tension that Evan could not explain, the kind that sits lightly on the chest and makes ordinary things feel important. Because when Grandpa Tom knocked on Evan's bedroom door and said they needed to leave early if they wanted a good day, his voice carried a warmth that hinted at more than errands. And as Evan followed him outside into the cool suburban air of a small American town where sidewalks were clean and lawns were trimmed, he noticed how Grandpa paused for a moment before getting into the car, looking up at the sky as if checking in with an old friend, then smiling to himself, and the drive started with the radio low, classic songs playing softly, the kind Grandpa loved, and Evan watched his hands on the steering wheel, steady but aged, each wrinkle telling a story Evan had never fully heard. And when Grandpa mentioned they needed swimsuits, towels, and sunscreen because later they planned to go to the community pool, Evan nodded, but he sensed the shopping trip was not really about those things, because Grandpa kept one hand in his shirt pocket, touching a folded paper like it mattered, and Evan wondered what was written there, a list maybe, or something else, something private, and the thought made him curious and slightly nervous, because Grandpa had been quieter than usual all week, not sad exactly, just thoughtful, like someone standing near a memory, and as they reached the shopping center parking lot, sunlight reflecting off cars and windows, Grandpa parked farther away than needed, saying walking was good for the heart, and Evan did not argue, because he liked walking with Grandpa, liked the way time slowed when they walked together, liked how Grandpa noticed things most people ignored, liked the sound of a bird or the way a breeze moved through trees planted between stores, and inside the mall, people moved fast, carrying bags, talking on phones, living their lives without noticing the small story unfolding between an old man and a teenager, and Grandpa led the way calmly, not rushing, stopping once to greet an old neighbor he barely remembered but smiled at anyway, and Evan felt a strange mix of pride and fear, pride because Grandpa seemed strong and present, fear because moments like this felt fragile, like they could slip away if not held carefully, and when they passed a sporting goods store, Grandpa slowed down, looking through the window at swim gear, and Evan saw his reflection in the glass beside Grandpa's, young and uncertain next to old and knowing, and it struck him how different and yet similar they were, both carrying feelings they did not know how to say out loud, and Grandpa finally went inside a clothing store instead, touching fabrics, lifting shirts, comparing colors, choosing carefully, and Evan followed, feeling like he was part of something quiet and serious, and when Grandpa chose a light blue shirt and held it up, his eyes softened, and for a second he looked far away, not at the shirt but at a memory, and Evan sensed that this shopping trip was opening a door Grandpa rarely opened, and though no big words were spoken yet, Evan felt the weight of history pressing gently into the present, and he understood that this day, which began with a simple plan to shop and swim, was already becoming something deeper, something about time, love, and the way small moments can carry the shape of a lifetime, and as Grandpa folded the shirt and placed it in the basket, his hand brushed the folded paper in his pocket again, and Evan realized that whatever was written there mattered, not because it would be bought, but because it would be remembered, and the story of the day had already begun moving faster than Evan expected, pulling him forward, even though he did not yet know where it would end. The second part of the day moved faster than Evan expected, as if the mall itself had decided not to let them linger too long in one place, because once Grandpa paid for the blue shirt, he led Evan past bright store signs and echoing hallways with purpose, stopping only when something quietly pulled at him, and soon they sat on a bench near a coffee shop where the smell of roasted beans mixed with the sound of distant laughter, and Grandpa rested his hands on his knees, breathing slowly, then spoke in a calm voice that carried years inside it, telling Evan about a woman named Margaret, someone he met decades ago during a summer when life felt wide open, when he was younger, stronger, and full of plans, and he explained how they met at a public pool during a heat wave, how she laughed easily and spoke honestly, how she made ordinary days feel rare, and Evan listened closely, surprised by how natural it felt to hear Grandpa speak about love, not as a lesson but as a memory, something tender and unfinished, and Grandpa did not dramatize it or make it sad, he simply said they cared deeply for each other but life took them in different directions, jobs, family needs, timing that never aligned, and Evan felt something shift inside him, because the story sounded familiar in a way he did not expect, echoing his own quiet feelings for Lily, a girl at school he liked but never knew how to reach, and just as Evan thought of her, he saw her across the open space of the mall, standing near a store with her friends. Her hair catching the light, her smile relaxed and free, and his heart reacted before his mind could catch up, tightening with hope and fear at the same time. And Grandpa noticed the change in Evan's posture, the stillness, the way his eyes stayed fixed in one direction, and instead of asking questions, Grandpa simply followed Evan's gaze, understanding more than Evan realized, and without turning the moment into something heavy, Grandpa spoke softly, saying that attraction is often quiet at first, that longing does not shout, it waits, and Evan felt seen without being exposed, and Lily did not notice him, not then, and when she walked away, the feeling lingered like a song cut off too early, but Grandpa did not rush to fill the silence, letting Evan sit with it, letting him learn that emotions did not need fixing right away, and after a while they stood up and continued walking, passing bookstores, shoe stores, families, couples holding hands, each scene adding to the sense that life was moving forward whether one was ready or not, and Grandpa bought swim goggles, sunscreen, and a towel, but none of those things felt as important as the story he had shared or the look Evan could not forget, and as they headed toward the exit, Grandpa reached into his pocket and unfolded the paper, not to read it but to smooth it, and Evan realized it was not a list at all, just a name written carefully, folded and carried for years, not because Grandpa could not let go, but because remembering was part of honoring what once mattered, and in that moment, Evan understood that love does not always end, sometimes it simply changes shape, becoming quieter, living in memory instead of action, and as they stepped back into the daylight, Evan felt older than he had that morning, not burdened, but aware that his feelings were valid, that uncertainty was part of growing, and that the heart learns by watching, by listening, and by walking beside someone who has already lived through what you are just beginning to feel. And the shopping trip ended, but the emotional weight of it stayed with Evan as they drove toward the pool, the road ahead bright and open, carrying both of them toward moments that would test what they had just learned without either of them fully realizing it yet. The pool area was alive with sound and movement the moment Evan and Grandpa arrived, water flashing under the afternoon sun, voices bouncing off concrete, the sharp smell of chlorine mixing with summer air, and everything felt louder, faster, more real than the quiet mall, because this was a place where memories were made without asking permission, and Evan felt it as soon as he stepped inside, carrying the bag with towels and goggles while Grandpa walked beside him, slower now, scanning the pool with a look that held both joy and distance, and Evan changed quickly and hurried out, the heat pushing him toward the water, but before jumping in he paused, because he saw Lily again, sitting near the edge with her feet in the pool, talking to a friend, sunlight touching her face in a way that made the moment feel fragile, and his chest tightened, not with fear this time but with something closer to courage, because Grandpa's words from earlier stayed with him, steady and calm, reminding him that feelings were not something to hide from, and Evan moved closer to the pool, sat down, let his feet slip into the water, feeling the cool rush climb his legs, grounding him, and Lily noticed him then, her eyes meeting his without surprise, without pressure, just a simple look that held curiosity, and she smiled, small but real, and that smile changed the entire day for Evan, because it told him that sometimes the smallest signs were enough to move forward, and he smiled back, not thinking, just responding, and they didn't speak yet, but the silence between them felt light, not heavy, and Evan pushed himself into the pool, swimming a short distance, feeling strong and present, while Grandpa settled into a chair nearby, removing his shoes carefully, rolling his pant legs up, watching the water with a soft expression, and as Evan swam, laughter breaking from him without effort, Grandpa's mind drifted, pulled by the familiar sounds, because decades earlier he had stood at a pool just like this one. Younger, unsure, watching Margaret swim, teasing him for staying dry too long, and he remembered how brave he felt when he finally joined her, how love once felt new and endless, and though time had taken her presence from his life, it had not taken the meaning of it, and watching Evan now stirred something deep and peaceful, a sense that love did not disappear, it traveled, finding new forms in new people, and Evan climbed out of the pool, water dripping from his hair, heart racing, and Lily was standing nearby now, alone, her friend gone, and she asked him how the water was, her voice easy, and Evan answered honestly, saying it was cold at first but good once you got used to it, and they laughed, because it was a simple truth that felt bigger than swimming, and they talked for a few minutes, about school, about summer plans, nothing dramatic, nothing forced, but each word carried weight, because it was real, and Evan felt himself opening, not rushing, just being there, and Grandpa watched from his chair, not listening, but understanding, because he had once stood in that same uncertain space, knowing that moments like this shaped people quietly, and when Evan returned to the water, Lily stayed at the edge, watching him swim, and Grandpa noticed the way Evan moved, confident now, lighter, and he felt proud, not because Evan was growing up, but because he was learning how to feel without fear, and as the sun lowered, shadows stretched across the pool, whistles blew, signaling the last swim, and Evan climbed out again, breathless and happy, and Lily waved goodbye, promising nothing but leaving a sense of possibility behind, and Evan waved back, knowing that whatever happened next, he had taken a step, and Grandpa stood carefully, joints stiff but spirit strong, and as they packed their things, the pool behind them glowing in the fading light, both of them felt the same quiet truth settle in their hearts, that this place, this afternoon, had connected past and present, memory and hope, and though neither said it out loud, they both knew that the water had carried more than bodies that day. It had carried courage, remembrance, and the understanding that love, whether old or new, always asks the same thing, to be felt honestly, even when the ending is unknown. The drive home felt different from the drive that morning, quieter but fuller, the kind of silence that does not ask to be filled, as the sun dipped low and painted the streets in soft gold. And Evan sat in the passenger seat with damp hair and tired arms, staring out the window while his thoughts moved. Quickly, replaying Lily's smile, the sound of her voice, the calm way the moment had unfolded without pressure, and he realized he was not chasing a feeling anymore but understanding it, letting it exist without forcing it to become something else. And Grandpa Tom drove steadily, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his lap, the folded paper still in his pocket, but it felt lighter now, less like a weight and more like a keepsake, because watching Evan at the pool had given him something he did not know he needed, a quiet reassurance that love did not end with age or loss, that it continued by passing forward, shaping the next generation in small, unseen ways. And as they stopped at a red light, Grandpa glanced at Evan and smiled, not the playful smile he used often, but a deeper one, filled with pride and peace, and he said simply that it had been a good day, and Evan agreed without hesitation, because the word good did not even feel big enough. And when they reached home, the house welcomed them with familiar stillness, the kind that holds memories in its walls, and Evan carried the bags inside, setting them down without thinking, while Grandpa moved slowly to his favorite chair, easing into it with a long breath, and for a moment they stayed where they were, not rushing to change or unpack, letting the day settle around them, and Evan realized that he felt closer to his grandfather than ever before, not because of anything dramatic that had happened, but because of what had been shared without explanation. And Grandpa reached into his pocket and unfolded the paper at last, smoothing it on the table, not hiding it anymore, and Evan saw the name written there, simple and careful, and Grandpa did not explain it, because he didn't need to, and Evan didn't ask, because he understood, and instead they talked about dinner, about ordinary plans, grounding themselves in the present. But the meaning of the day stayed with them, and later that night, as Evan lay in bed, he thought about how the mall, the pool, the drive, all ordinary places, had become part of something larger, a quiet turning point, and Grandpa sat alone for a while before bed, listening to the night sounds outside, thinking about Margaret, not with sadness, but with gratitude, knowing that love had shaped him into someone who could guide Evan gently, without fear or bitterness, and as the house grew still, both of them carried the same understanding into sleep, that life moves fast, that moments pass whether we hold them or not, but when we choose to be present, to feel deeply without harm or regret, those moments stay, not as burdens, but as quiet strengths, and the next day would come with its own plans and worries, but this day, the one that began with shopping and ended with reflection, would remain with them, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and in that reality, both a young heart and an old one had found calm, connection, and the gentle truth that love, in all its forms, does not demand anything more than honesty, patience, and the courage to keep going forward.